Well, good day. We're back today and we're going to be talking about when should you retire? And we're going to see part two. We did part one yesterday. And of course, you'll be able to see those videos that are going to be up on YouTube. For those of you that are in the live audience, I'll be answering questions at the end. For the recording, if you have any questions, you can just reach out to me if we haven't covered them in the materials today. I, of course, am Amy Rose Herrick, and if you look down below in the show notes, you'll be able to see some links and connections and some other things. I'm going to go right into screen sharing so we can get started. I try to keep these in under an hour and want to make sure we've got plenty of time for questions and things at the end. So we'll get that going if it is ready to cooperate at this point. Let me get my chat up so I can see that as I go. Now, folks, I work with two different screens here, so I'll come back and be looking at you here, but we're also going to go through some slides at this point. So when we're talking about point on two, I always do a quick disclosure. Understand your circumstances are unique. So I would expect you to touch base with your current advisors. If you don't have an advisor, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. Many of these concepts, I'm going to suggest you may need to speak with your tax person, your accountant. It could be someone who handles your portfolio. It's going to vary quite a bit because, again, some of you have teams that are already built, but all of us are different. Now, along with that, I'm just going to do a real quick recap about at what age should you retire? And many people, and looking at this, you usually base it on an age, but I don't really think that has anything to do with retirement at this point. When you define early, most of you are defining early as age 62, and that's only because that's what Social Security has told you is early. Now, when we define full retirement age, again, that's going to be Social Security has defined that, and it may be between ages 65 and 67, depending upon what your birth date is. And then we have delayed retirement, and a couple of pictures that I put up there, some of you should recognize. You know, we're looking at Mick Jagger there, and we're looking at Morgan Freeman. Now, I'm going to say that I don't know that Morgan has retired because, of course, as long as Morgan is still doing movies and has worked in that, he certainly didn't choose to retire. You'll notice on the left-hand picture that I've got some younger individuals. Now, there are many people that have arranged their lifestyles. Maybe they've sold a company, whatever the case may be, but they have retired from a position. They may go into another career or another position, but I have individuals who may retire 2 or 3 times because there are different seasons in their life that have come to an end, and they've gone forward and they've decided to do something else. So I am not convinced that age has anything to do with retirement. It usually has to do with what Social Security has dictated, or if you have a pension plan or a tax law, something has chosen a number, but that doesn't mean that that's the correct number for you. Your retirement resources can be many things, and most people think it's just money, and I tend to disagree. I think everything from your income screen to your time, knowledge, ability, your surroundings, your desires. What about your health? That is definitely an asset going into retirement. And then you've also got talents. All of these things come into being, and what most people don't realize is when you go into retirement, I have seen that now you become a full-time asset manager, and all of these different assets that you have that I've listed and others that may be unique to you are all part of your retirement assets, but most of you just think about money. And I think it's far more than that. Now, we're going to just briefly touch on, and this is a reminder from the first session, what is enough going into retirement? Well, enough is a different thing for different people. And so when I'm looking at retirement, you can have different stages of retirement, but what is enough? Now, there is a huge difference between not enough and enough. And many times we have to rearrange those retirement assets that you have, again, not just money, to see if we can change not enough to enough and what options may be available there. And just a refresher on the different types of retirement, well, there's the dream retirement. That's where everything goes exactly according to plan. You have more than enough resources to do whatever it is you want to do. Maybe you are working part-time because you like to work part-time, or maybe you need to work part-time. So there could be a working partial retirement where you're not fully retired. There can be a realistic retirement based on all of the resources that you have. What is a realistic retirement that you can sustain? Then I also look at stages of retirement can change over time, depending upon what your opportunities are, what your desires, your health. All of those things can come into play, and that you may have different phases of retirement. You may have a phase that is your dream retirement. You may have a working partial retirement for a period of time, or realistic. It's all fluid at that point. But the good news is you're in charge. Excuse me, I got a little tickle today. All right, let's go back into this. Could you be forced to retire? I put a few things up on the screen. We talked about this in session 1 too. You know, it isn't always retiring because you want to retire. I've seen a lot of individuals retire because they need to move full-time into a caregiving role. Whether that is for a spouse, this could be a child, a grandchild, this can be for a parent. The other thing that can force people into retirement has to do with physical issues. Maybe your stamina has changed. Has your eyesight changed? Has your mobility, your strength? We don't like it, but the body has a natural aging process. And for many of us, what we can do at 65, 75, and 85 is very different than what we can do at 25 and 35. And so all of these things can come into play that can also dictate when or at what point is a good time for you to be retired. Now, in session 1, we talked about a lot of different scenarios and taxes. So now we're going to go into session 2, and now we're going to cover some new areas. For some of you, I already mentioned the word enough. When we're looking at the resources, there may not be enough for you to stay where you are. Some of you have not even considered a retirement lifestyle abroad because it never really entered your mind, and it's not what anybody is talking about. But when you look at retiring abroad, depending upon where you go, you could have a reduction in your expenses of anywhere from 20 to 50% and have a lifestyle abroad that you could not afford to have where you're at in your current location. So transforming into this sometimes takes some planning and time. There are some individuals who will sell off absolutely everything and they leave with 2 suitcases and they start over. Others will ship many of their possessions to another area. There's a lot of flexibility here. But it is possible, if you have a retirement that is not enough, to be enough when you retire. And there are many people who are successfully living abroad on only Social Security and living a much greater lifestyle than they would have had, say, in the US. They have medical care, they have leisure travel. So it all depends on where you go. But the same could be said for in the US. If you're living in a very expensive area, changing locations to a much lower area of cost could have a huge difference and switch you from having not enough to having enough going into retirement. I don't usually endorse a lot of things, but one of the things I have found that is extremely helpful, if you've never heard of the International Living magazine, International Living has individuals who are living abroad, tips, tricks, resources, the lowdown on medical care, buying properties, all different types of things that if you were considering moving abroad, that this might be a very good, inexpensive resource for you. When you are a member, you get your monthly issues. I'm a subscriber because I look at different things. And then in addition to that, there's the website. So you can go back and there are other resources available. So if it's something that you're not sure about, maybe this is a resource that you could look at and explore. And some individuals do not live abroad all the time. Some may only live abroad for half of the year. Maybe they escape the winters that they don't like anymore. But again, this is your retirement. You can choose to make it any way you want. For some of you who are a little concerned about, I'm not sure that I can afford this, Now, there is a foreign income exclusion. This goes back to talking to your tax person. If you earn income abroad, it could be excluded from income taxes, but it doesn't matter where you live in the world, you are still going to file income taxes. And so you've got to be aware of this. Now, if there are taxes in the jurisdiction you're living in, you may get a credit against your US taxes. So again, this may be a piece you have to explore. If you are earning self-employment income when you're abroad, maybe you are teaching English as a second language online. Maybe you have a self-employed business, you're consulting. You will need to pay Social Security taxes. You still need to file on those. So this will be a component you need to work with. However, this is a book, inexpensive book, also by International Living, Retiring Overseas on a Budget. You'll notice the big red arrow that I put on this, because this gives you many locations and the details and standard of living and costs and those type of things on how to live well on $25,000 a year or less. So if our retirement isn't what you had anticipated it would be, maybe this is one of the things, if you were willing to make those kind of changes, that could change not enough to enough, in addition to some of the things that we discussed in segment number 1. And if you hadn't seen segment number 1 before number 2, I would encourage you to stop, go back and watch 1 before you watch 2, and it'll help frame some of these conversations a little bit more. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, I'll just turn part of my house into a rental unit, and that will help bridge the gap. And the answer is that may be possible. The first thing that we've got to do is check the zoning and see if that's allowed in the home that you have. Do you have to have a license as a landlord? You know, what types of things would go along with that? Now, there are individuals that are doing Airbnb or VRBO for part of their homes, and that is a different entity. With those many jurisdictions, you need to collect occupancy taxes. Before you begin any of these endeavors, talk to your local licensing bureaus, and then also talk to your tax professional who can help guide you to set this up and do it correctly, and can help guide you on what you need to do as far as taxes, because this income will be taxable to you, and you need to know about depreciation and what expenses are property-wide, what are expenses are unique to the unit. But this could be an item that helps you bridge the gap from not enough to enough. I do want to caution some of you, if you do not want to be a landlord 24/7, 365 days a year, so that every time a tenant calls that you need to respond to that. You need to look at it, and when you are working with your professionals to determine if this is going to increase your income, you may need to build in a management company, someone to take care of the details. I will let you know, in my particular area, the management company, when they screen renters, say for a 1-year lease, they will often take a 1 month's rent as their fee for getting the renters screened, leases in, that type of thing. So that's a month of rent you would lose. In addition to that, they have a fee that is per month, and that could be 20% or more, depending upon your area, of each month's rent to collect it and to maintain that. In addition, if you give them the authority to handle any repairs that may need done, they may be responsible for scheduling those, and then they may have an additional charge that they add, 10%, 20%, whatever the agreement with you is, in order to arrange those and to be there, meet them, or make sure that those repairs are done correctly. So there is an option with hiring someone to take these details over for you, but it's not going to be free. Can it work in your equation so that the amount that you would earn is still going to make this viable for you? It's an option. Now, the other thing that you need to do, and I just put this one up as a quickie, this is called a Schedule E as in Edward. So if you are considering doing anything with a rental property, you can go on irs.gov if you're in the US and take that, and it will give you a Schedule E, and this will help you understand some of the dynamics that go along with a rental property. You need to keep track of how many days it's rented, how many days it's not rentable, your expenses. And again, this is a very good item to speak to your tax professional about. Now, along with being a landlord, whether you're a short-term rental or not, again, oh, that shouldn't be occupancy axes, it should be taxes. We'll fix that. And so on the occupancy taxes, you write that one down. And cleaning fees, listing fees. Now, if you have a long-term rental, there may be leases. Some of you may be looking at Section 8. Well, one of the things that we saw with the pandemic is that in many jurisdictions, they put a hold on any evictions. If an individual could not pay their rent for a certain period of time, this left the landlord out in the cold. Whether you will collect this money or not, I have no idea. Some communities had pools of funds that were available to help individuals pay their rent, but the individual who was renting it needed to go through the processes. And of course, you would want to assist with that all you can. But there are risks in being a landlord that you may want to remove a person from your premises in the lease, but there may be something prohibiting you from doing that. So again, there are some benefits and there are also risks for being a landlord. Go into it with your eyes wide open so you don't have any unpleasant surprises. So I'm going to mention we can't go into retirement without thinking about enough. You know, if we don't have enough, if we need enough. So it's going to be a target that keeps changing for you. Another thing that can come into play, I see a lot of grandparents that are raising grandchildren. It may be for a short period of time. It may be until they are raised. All families and family dynamics are different, but we all have families and not everything works out happily ever after. One of the things that I need to impress upon you as grandparents, if you are raising grandchildren and you are under a guardianship, if the parents have not passed away, there will be no resources for you from Social Security. However, if you are the parent, if you adopt these children before, and the key word is before you start pulling your Social Security, there can be dependent benefits that would be 1/2 of your Social Security check for that child who you have adopted as your child. And I believe it is 50% of what your Social Security would be. So if you see these dynamics happening in your family, I want you to seek out counsel. I want you to talk with them at Social Security and an attorney and see if you need to potentially delay retirement in order to get an adoption and have it in place long enough, because this could be a resource going into your retirement, especially if you're going to be raising these children into adulthood, that you may need in order to bridge the gap between not enough and enough. This is called reality. Some of you, unfortunately, will lose your children to death. What are the arrangements there? Life insurance, what's the difference between not enough and enough? And if you don't know, that's an excellent time to reach out to an advisor to help you put those pieces in place. Well, what about drawing Social Security early? I want my Social Security, but what's a break-even point? And in Section 1, we talked about how you can forfeit Social Security if you retire early and you make too much money. Again, I encourage you to go back and see segment 1 where we covered some other areas. Now, the assumption is, this is a very simple assumption. I do not worry about cost of living increases. The reason I don't is what I have generally found is if you get a cost of living increase in your Social Security, that is added to your check, but it is often taken away because of the increase in the Medicare premiums. So I don't find that the cost of living increases really have any type of an increase in income effect. Now, in our example, now this is a very quick example. First, we would want to go through and we would want to do a life expectancy test. Now, these can be very easy. They're often available through, you can find them on the web. I have a couple of insurance companies that have actuarials that we use. If you do a life expectancy test and you don't like the answers, you cannot change the answers to get a different number. It is what it is. And I usually suggest you take that number and you add 5 or 10 years because it's just an average. Let's say that I am 62 years old and I'm going to get $750 a month in Social Security. So over 12 months, I would collect $9,000. If I wait to age 63, I would get a $63 a month increase. So that would be $813 a month, and I would collect $9,756 in a year. Well, if I look at the $9,000 I would have in my hand between the ages of 62 and 63, and I divide that by the increase of $63 a month I got by waiting that 1 year, it's going to take me 143 months or 11.9 years to break even at age 74.9. Now, if I did a life expectancy and my life expectancy was less than 74.9, and I was not working where I would forfeit any Social Security benefits, then it may make sense for me to pull the Social Security early so that I have that $9,000 in my hand. This is a very simple math equation, but again, I encourage you to look at the life expectancies. Now, when you do that, you also need to do the life expectancy for each spouse if you happen to be married, and it will help you with some of the pension longevity questions. With the pension, we often have to look at, do you want a full life-only pension, or do we want a reduced survivorship pension? Again, usually I recommend you talk to professionals to see what's going to be best for you. You want to do this far in advance. You do not show up at someone's office and say, oh, I've already turned my papers in. I'm retiring in 2 weeks. I really encourage you to have these conversations 2 years or at least a year before, so that you can put the pieces in place that will be the most tax efficient for you, where you pay the lowest amount of taxes, you make the right decision on pensions and pulling Social Security, because the goal is to put the most money and resources in your pocket during these transitions. And in section 1, I talked about the 3 most important tax years. Now, if you have a family history where many members of your family live a very long time, then you may have different assumptions. If I look at this and I assume that this person lives to age 87, you'll see if we start drawing at age 66 and we get $1,000 a month for 12 months, then between the ages of 66 and 87 is 21 years, and they'd collect $252,000. So your Social Security is a substantial retirement resource. If they waited to age 70 and they got an increase of $300 a month to $1,300 a month, then they would only draw it for 17 years, the difference between 70 and age 87, and they would collect $265,200. If we have long life expectancies, just this one base period, they would have 13,200 and higher benefits in just this first 17 years. If you have life expectancy that goes beyond that, then of course that amount gets larger and larger. And this is where the life expectancy test can really come in and can help on making the decision that puts the most money into your resources. I did just another one real quick. So if we collected $750 a month from age 62 to 74.9, it's $107,250. We are essentially even if we collect it from 63 to 74. If this isn't math you're good at, reach out and have somebody help you with a little bit. What if I increase it to age 84? Well, now you're noticing when that life expectancy gets a little longer, waiting makes much more sense, because you're starting to see the gap. You're starting to see the spread, and we want the most money in your pocket. There's one more. What if we do the life expectancy to age 90? Now you can see the spread in this case is over $40,000. So again, life expectancy is very important in these scenarios. Now we also have options when it comes to our pension payouts. And on the pension payouts, there's usually the first option for those of you who have earned a pension. Let's say that it is a taxable life-only pension for $1,000 a month. That means if I have a spouse, that spouse will get nothing at my death. So whether I collect it for 3 months or I collect it until I'm 105, it's only going to pay for my life at $1,000 a month. Now I have an option. and I may have 10 different options, but we're going to say the option that we have is that whatever I collect, my spouse would collect. It would be 100% whether I was living or not. And that would drop my pension down to only $800 a month. So I am paying a $200 a month reduction in my pension to ensure that my spouse would receive a survivorship pension. Now, if I paid $200 a month, and that's 12 times a year for 20 years, I have paid $48,000. Now, let's assume that I died after that time frame. So at 20 years, well, my survivor would need to live for at least another 5 years in order to break even to get back at least the $48,000 that we had paid for this benefit over the years. Are you seeing again why I keep coming back to these life expectancies? Now, what happens if we did the $200 a month, 12 times a year for 30 years? Well, we paid $72,000 for this. If my spouse was still living at that time, then they would have to draw that until they were at least 7.5 years after that point to break even. What happens if my spouse died before I did? Wouldn't matter. There would be no residual benefit to anyone else. And I would still continue to get only the $800 a month because the pension agreement did exactly what it said it would do on a reduced pension. It would pay $800 a month, whether I lived or died, and my spouse survived. If my spouse did not survive and died prior to my death, it doesn't change the fact that the benefit would have been there. Now, I want you to understand that in some of you, you both have a pension. Now, think about this. If she takes a survivorship pension, or I'll say she, not necessarily true because I have same-sex couples that have pensions too, depends on your jurisdiction and the rules. So if I have a spouse, we'll call it a spouse. If we have a spouse that has a pension and they get to choose between a life-only pension and a survivorship pension, and we have the other spouse also has the same options. If both spouses take a survivorship pension, one of you is paying for a benefit you cannot possibly realize. One spouse dies, there's no point in having the survivorship spouse option on both pensions. You need to talk to your financial advisors to understand what's going to be the desk dynamic that you have. Some of you may have heard the term pension maximization. Pension maximization looks at that reduction that you have in the pension. And the example that I gave you, it was $200 a month. Can I buy life insurance well in advance of when I would start the pension that would replace my pension income for my spouse? And life insurance is tax-free, a pension is taxable, for less than the $200 a month that the pension reduction is going to cost me? Well, the answer is, I don't know. It depends upon your health. It depends upon your age. It depends upon the amount of the benefit and the reduction. But we want to know, what is the least expensive method? Is it taking the survivorship through the pension because it's cheaper? Or is it less expensive for us to do it through life insurance? So in the chart that you see up in front of you now, if I wanted to replace my $1,000 a month pension, and we did a little calculation on it, and we decided that we wanted to replace it for 35 years all the way up to age 100. Well, if I did just simple math and took $1,000 a month times 12 months in a year and 35 years, we need $420,000, and we're assuming it's earning absolutely nothing. And we're also assuming that there's absolutely no raise coming to the spouse because most pensions are fixed. A few have cost of living raises, but not always. Well, I have some options here. If I believed that I could average 2% interest, then I only need $303,000 of life insurance. And by the time I reached age 100, there would be about $553 in the account. It did what I anticipated it would do. You'll notice as the interest rates go up, the amount of life insurance required goes down. I will tell you personally, looking at a 30-year time frame, I am not comfortable with doing anything that's above the 4 or 5% range. If you count on getting 8, 9, or 10% every year, and in the front of the equation, you don't get it, or you have negative returns, this will blow up and explode. It will not work. So I usually want to use very conservative estimates. If we end up averaging much more, wonderful, we can have a raise, but we do not want to run out of money. The amount of life insurance, when the face amount is changed, the premiums generally drop. So all of these have a purpose in deciding what the correct answer is. And we've got some variables to work with to design the program that is the best for you. Now, is it the most cost effective? I don't know. You need to work with professionals, and you've got to have lead time on this. And don't you think it's an answer you should know before you start filling out and signing all of those papers? Once you sign them and you make a decision, it is irrevocable. You cannot change your mind. So take care of this well in advance. The other thing that I want to talk to you about is what I call the big check, little check when it comes to Social Security. If you have a spouse and you are both receiving Social Security checks, chances are the household is income and needs are based on having 2 Social Security checks. What happens is when one spouse dies, the smaller Social Security check or the little check will disappear. Where's the money coming from to replace that lost Social Security? This is especially devastating for spouses if this happens early on into retirement and they really didn't anticipate that that was going to happen. And with that, let's look at, if I was the person who was getting the bigger check, and I don't care if it's only $1, if I receive the biggest check, then my check is not going to change. It will stay level. If I was the person who was receiving the little check after the notification of the death and a trip down to Social Security, then I would get an increase in my Social Security check to equal whatever the big check had been in the household. But regardless, the amount of the little check is going to disappear. Many of you have been told you don't need life insurance going into retirement. Well, if your lifestyle and everything is dependent on that second security check, the smaller one, then you may need to have the discussion and you may need to continue life insurance or secure new life insurance in order to replace that little check if that's going to be devastating into the household. The other thing that is a surprise when we lose a spouse into retirement is, I will call it one of the cruelest tax levies of all. In many cases, your income is significantly changed, but now instead of the married rates, now you are taxed at the single rates, which are higher tax rates. When you have this, you've got to talk with your tax professionals to see what this is going to look like and how this is going to affect your income and whether you need to change withholding allowances or how that's all going to work out on the tax side. Now you have an option. After we've had these discussions, you can do absolutely nothing and you hope you're the spouse who dies first so you don't have to make the hard choices. Or you can choose to do something well in advance in order to provide for a spouse or to provide for family members or to provide for grandchildren if you happen to be raising those that we spoke about earlier. But that's really a choice that you have. Now, I saw some of you are going, well, Amy, this is great. You keep talking about spouses, but well, I'm single right now. I don't know that I'm ever going to be married. Well, some of your decisions are very easy. The Social Security decision is easy because it's strictly based on your lifespan. We can add 5 or 10 years to the number. You want to plan your annual retirement budget and you want to incorporate long-term care planning. I need to do that for everyone, but especially individuals, because in many cases, some of my single individuals are also childless, and I need to know that they're going to be taken care of if the needs arise, because they may not have the extended family network to be able to step in if they needed a little assisted living to stay in their home as long as possible. And we don't want them to be impoverished and to be out on the street and desperate. So single, we have a little different dynamics that we work with. Some of them are easy, some of them are a little harder. It all depends on your dynamics. Now let's talk about the ugly side. Sometimes getting into retirement or before retirement, we have a divorce. It happens for a variety of reasons. When you have a divorce and there is a pension plan or there is a payroll deduct payroll plan, like a 401k, it could be a 403b. Maybe you have IRA, maybe you have Roth IRA accounts. There's what's known as a qualified domestic relations order. It's called a quadro. The judge will work this into the divorce decree, but it is not the attorney's job or the court's job to actually enforce it and to get it underway. It is your job. Now, I can give you all kinds of horror stories of people who did not fill out the paperwork, and then the ex-spouse died, and all of the resources were paid to the new spouse because that's who the beneficiary was changed to. And the divorced spouse never turned in the paperwork to claim their half of the benefit. So once I say, as soon as the gavel hits the table, you want to get the quadro going, you want to contact, for example, if my spouse had worked at ABC Plumbing Contractors Pension Plan, then I would want to contact them directly, explain to them, I'm divorced, I have a quadro. What do you need in order to exercise? Many of them have what I will call sample documents or documents you just fill in. Those have to be often gone through the court to have a court order to confirm it and exercise it. It may take you a little bit of time for them to process it and to confirm, but then those accounts are split. And once they are split according to the court order, those assets are yours and you will not lose them. So I really can't stress enough, those of you who have quadros or those of you who have been divorced, even if it was many years ago, please pull these documents out. If there is a quadro and it has not been exercised, whether it is for you or an adult child, get that paperwork done now, not next month, not after the new year, not after your birthday. Do it now, because in these cases, sometimes days and weeks make a difference on whether you end up with half of the account or some other fraction or absolutely nothing. Again, I'm going to reiterate, who fills out the actual paperwork to execute it? You do. The person who is divorced, who has been awarded an interest in that account, is responsible for doing that paperwork. Managing your personal level of risk. We're talking about going into retirement. You may have some 401ks, IRAs, whatever the case may be. Maybe you've got money over in the bank sitting in CDs. Everybody is different. You cannot take your portfolio and set it and forget it. It is not a crock pot that you throw everything in and then somewhere later you take the lid off and see how it all worked out. You got to have a relationship with an investment advisor. If you have mutual funds, 401ks, you have some of the things that are on platforms online, you are paying a small amount of that investment on what are called 12B1 fees or management fees. Talk to these individuals to work with them on the risks. You're paying for it, whether you pick up the phone and you talk to them once a month or you never talk to them, you're still paying for that fee. Don't waste that opportunity to get the advice so that you're not taking more risk than you're comfortable with, but at the same time, don't be so conservative that you eliminate the opportunity for your money to grow and at least keep track with inflation. Now, one of the other tools that is out there for retirement planning that you may or may not know about is the AARP retirement calculator. It's free. It's on the website. And with that, it's very, very simple to go through and find. And I'm just going to give you a couple of sample pages. There's a couple of easy tabs that you go through to fill out the information. Well, are you married or not? That one's pretty simple. We'll go through and what are your ages? At what point do you plan to retire? Are you male or female? We'll go down and we'll start talking about how much you have in retirement savings. There's also some questions about how much, you're going to receive. So very, very easy questions. Your Social Security. If you go to ssa.gov, Social Security Administration.gov, ssa.gov, then you're going to be able to get your Social Security report, which you should be looking at to make sure all your years of wages are on it and that it is correct. It can also be a flag for someone using your Social Security number if you notice the wages are way higher than anything that you've ever earned. It's worth a trip to find out if somebody is using your account. When we go through and we can estimate all of those things, we can have lifestyle. So there's a lot of questions, but very, very easy to answer. You're going to come back with a chart and it's going to give you some ideas where understand this is a moving target and this is just one model. But on this particular model, in this example, they said the minimum needed to retire was just over $754,000. And based on what you had saved, it's only at $582,000. We either need to make some lifestyle changes to change these amounts, or you may need to delay retirement. Now, if you don't like the answers, you can pretend they don't exist, but it's not going to change your reality at some point. But what you can do is to go back in and you can change your numbers. And when you change the numbers, you're going to see some different results. So in this case, maybe they delayed their retirement a little bit. I don't remember in this particular case what we did, but the minimum needed to retire, and that's what you will have saved. So we see that there's definitely some room here and there's some padding. We can go back over at this one and there's a huge shortfall on what they would have saved. So it's a tool that you can use in private. And if you want to kind of start some discussions, it will also give you an idea of, your retirement plan is over budget. And on these, you'll see we changed the ages from 62 to 67 to 70. You'll need to spend how much less? Well, that's really up to you on how you do that. Remember my conversation early on about how much is enough and what do we have to work with? Sometimes you can bridge the gap. Sometimes you can't where you are and you need to make changes. But this is an opportunity for you to choose what happens in the future. Now, you also may have some non-qualified accounts. Now, what does non-qualified mean? Well, a non-qualified account, we're going to go back a slide, hit the button too fast. On a non-qualified, that just means that it is not specifically titled as a retirement asset. Now, a 401k and an IRA or a Roth IRA are specifically titled to be retirement assets. Your checking account, your money market, your savings account, your CDs are all examples of non-qualified accounts. You could also have mutual funds that didn't have IRA in the titling. You could have annuities that were not with retirement in the title. So there are different options that you may have that are non-qualified assets. Now, generally non-qualified assets do not come with tax bills. Again, go back to session 1 and we'll address some of those portions of it. Well, here's one. Should you put in place your own personal tax-free pension plan? Did you even know such a thing existed? Some of you have heard the term, some of you haven't, but we're just going to go through a really basic example. This is a life insurance ledger. It is built on a life insurance chassis. You will notice I do not have on here whether it's male or female, their age, the name of the company. I took all of those things off because I just want to talk to you about the concept. You would need to talk to a licensed professional in your jurisdiction about what products are available and how this might work for you. In this particular example, when we looked at a long term, we're going to estimate an average of 6.09 based historically on what this has done within this particular product. It's a number. Yours could be lower, yours could be higher. They took a pretty good sum and they put $95,000 in each one of these years. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then at the end of that time frame, they see the brackets. This is where they started pulling an income stream out of the policy. First, they are taking back their contributions, which was the $95,000 a year. Then they're going to take loans against the policy. That makes all of this income tax-free. Now, some individuals will put much less into this. They may put $25,000 a year. Some individuals may put $250,000 a year. It all depends on your circumstances, your resource, and what you're trying to do. It is my opinion from the research and the cases I've worked on, you want a minimum of 7 to 10 years. If you have longer, it's even better. But this is an option you might want to look at. Now, understand, because this is built on a life insurance chassis. If I was this person and I paid $95,000 and at the tail end of the year, before the next premium was due, I died, there is a $1,762,025 death benefit that would go to whoever are the beneficiaries I have chosen. That beneficiary could be a spouse, it could be children, it could be a charity, it could be my church. It is anyone that I have decided to name, and they would receive those proceeds tax-free. What if I did this for a period of years, let's say down here at 5 years, whatever, the world changed, and I said, you know what, I do not want to do this anymore. Well, there is a cash value, and that at the end of that time frame, whatever's in this column, this is the amount of money that you could receive back. Depending upon how much you've paid into it and when you cash it out, there may or may not be a taxable event when you do that. Let's pretend that I paid this, I've been pulling this money out, and I've taken all this money, and I die at the end of this particular year after I've been taking my income stream. Well, now the death benefit would be $1,470,056. If I continued this on for another significant period of years, you're going to see in this particular slide where at some point we decided that we had planned to not take it anymore. However, I continued to live even though I wasn't taking this income out, and you'll notice that there is still a death benefit. However, the death benefit continues to decline over time as I continued to take money and cash out of the policy. This is called a tax-free pension plan. Talk to your professionals and see if this is something that would be a good option for building up your retirement resources. So it's homework time. It's time to do some realistic income and expense projection, and it may be some of the most valuable time that you spend. You're going to spend many years into retirement is our goal. You cannot spend 20 or 30 minutes on the financial side and expect this to last you for the next 20 or 30 years. You take the time in order to make it the retirement that will be as stress-free and as easy of a transition as possible for you. So I'm going to go back to, what's age got to do with your retirement? It all depends on your resources. It depends upon what lifestyle you want. It depends on what phase of retirement that you happen to be in. But this answer is unique to you and isn't necessarily always controlled by someone else. Now, I love this quote from Mark Twain. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things that you didn't do than by the ones you did do. So throw off the bow lines, sail away from the safe harbor, catch the trade winds in your sails, explore, dream, and discover. Now, this is going to bring me to the portion where I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing the screen at this point. And I will be stopping the recording here pretty quick so that I can go back and we're going to handle any questions that I had from the live audience that was with us today. Please check out some of the other recordings that we have. And if you look down in the show notes, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see other resources that I have available. Please subscribe to my channel and go to the Facebook page for These Secret Profits, and you'll be able to see any other sessions that I have coming up. If you go underneath on Facebook, the More tab, and then on events. Thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciated you being here.